Have you ever promised yourself, tomorrow I'll start, only to wake up late, stare at the ceiling, and feel that quiet disappointment sink in? Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, but the silent kind that whispers, is this really all my life is going to be? Maybe you've tried to change before. Maybe you've told yourself this time would be different. And maybe, like most people, you went back to the same routine by the end of the week. What if the problem isn't motivation, talent, or luck? What if your entire future is being decided in a single overlooked hour each day, the hour before the world wakes up? This is not a story about overnight success. It's a story about a man who had nothing, no advantages, no shortcuts, until he learned how to use that one quiet hour. His name was Eli Navarro. He was 34 years old and lived in a coastal city where fishing boats were turned before sunrise and the streets smelled of salt and diesel. Every night, while homes went dark and families fell asleep, Eli pulled on a worn uniform and worked as a parking lot attendant near the docks, walking empty rows of cars under flickering streetlights. And every morning, just as the city began to wake, when joggers appeared, cafes unlocked their doors, and office lights flicked on, Eli walked home exhausted, feeling like his life was moving backward while everyone else moved forward. He wasn't lazy, he worked hard, 6 nights a week, rarely missed a shift, and did everything that was asked of him. But effort without direction had quietly trapped him. He lived in a tiny studio above a closed laundromat with peeling paint, one chair, one table, and an old wall clock whose ticking felt louder at night, as if it were counting down his life 1 second at a time. Once a week his father called from their hometown and spoke gently, never accusing, never demanding, only saying, "Son, I don't need you rich, I just want to know you're steady." And Eli always replied, "I'm getting there," even though after the call ended, he sat in silence, knowing he didn't even know where there was. Morning after morning, he slept while the world worked, and worked while the world slept, feeling like he was living his life in reverse. Then one morning, just before dawn, everything cracked when his phone buzzed with a message that his father had collapsed at work. Eli took the earliest bus out of the city, watching streetlights blur past the window, his chest tight with fear and regret. Sitting beside his father's hospital bed, seeing him smaller and weaker than he remembered, Eli heard words that burned into him deeper than any shout ever could. "Don't wait too long to live. Time doesn't ask before it leaves." Those words didn't make Eli cry. They made him angry. Angry at himself for surviving instead of building, for waiting instead of choosing. Later, standing outside the hospital as night slowly faded into morning, Eli noticed a lighthouse glowing steadily across the water, cutting through the darkness without noise or urgency, and for the first time he wondered if his life didn't need more effort, but a different beginning. On the bus ride back to the city, he sat across from a calm, composed woman named Marisol Vega, who was quietly writing in a notebook even though it was barely 6 in the morning. When Eli finally asked why she was awake so early, she smiled and said she woke up before the world demanded anything from her, because mornings belonged to people who wanted more than survival. Eli laughed softly and said sleep owned him, that he worked nights, but she shook her head and replied, "Then rearrange your sleep, not your dream," before handing him a small piece of paper with a single sentence written on it. 5 a.m. isn't a time, it's a doorway. The next morning, when Eli's alarm rang at 5, his body begged him to quit. His mind negotiated, and every excuse felt reasonable, but he stood up anyway. The first days were brutal. Heavy eyes, aching bones, foggy thoughts, but he used the quiet mornings to learn, to walk through silent streets, and to plan a life he had never planned before. Slowly, pain turned into routine, routine turned into discipline, and discipline turned into identity. His focus sharpened, his confidence grew, and without announcing it to anyone, Eli began applying what he learned at work, fixing small problems no one else bothered to notice. At first, nothing changed, and then suddenly, everything did. Opportunity followed, not overnight, not magically, but steadily. Better hours, a better role, and the first clear direction he had ever known. 1 year later, Eli stood in a brighter apartment, sunlight filling the room, his father healthier beside him, and every morning at 5 a.m. he still woke up, not because he had to, but because that hour had become sacred. And if you're listening to this, understand something important. You already have what Eli didn't: access, information, and opportunity. The only question is whether you'll claim that quiet hour or keep sleeping through your future, because the world is shaped before sunrise, and your future is waiting on the other side of that alarm.
If this video helped you, please subscribe for more.